historical day, everyone.
An historical day to our dear blackmates and Dr. Corpus.
It's indeed a historical day because today we are going to witness the second group's webinar with the title EDUKasaysayan, a webinar touching on the historical foundations of education. We are your hosts, Melbert Galasinao
And Christian Elacoria, and welcome everyone. So, Teacher Mel, no, I would like to comment first to our participants for today's webinar na talagang kitang-kita natin na excited sila, talagang masaya sila dito sa ating webinar.
Agree.
Yan. So, dahil alam naman natin no, yung kalagayan ng mga participants natin ngayon. So, Teacher Mel, how are you feeling today for our today's webinar?
Thank you for that question. I'm feeling quite thrilled today, Teacher Christian, because I am certain that we are about to watch a very insightful webinar. How about you?
Yes, I couldn't agree more, Teacher Mels. That's why I'm also very excited and looking forward to learn something new and valuable knowledge from our amazing guest speakers.
Yes, but before that, let us have some technical checks. Everyone, kindly press that like button if you are seeing the screens. Yes. Thank you for all the reactions.
Okay, so we're all clear. So next is our audio clear? So kindly hit the heart button for confirmation, guys. Okay, so I think we're all good, Teacher Mel.
One more thing, guys, make sure po na nakamute ang ating microphones throughout the program to avoid any distractions or unnecessary noises.
Yes, that's right. So kung meron pa dyan ng mga kumakain pa o kaya nakahiga pa, no? So ito, mag-focus na po tayo sa ating webinar at ilaan natin yung full attention no, sa magiging pagtalakay ng ating mga speakers.
All right, I think we are all set now. Simulan na natin to. To begin with, we know that the relationship of society and schools is deeply rooted with its history.
Yes, that's right. And with that being said, there is also a need to prove that schools transmit cultural values by stating facts gathered from local and worldwide history of education.
Yes, and we also need to explain the meaning of socialization as a function of schools. And this is the very reason as to why we are conducting this kind of webinar. And we are very excited about what's more in the store for all of you.
Yes, and before we go to the welcoming remarks, let us have first our doxology to be followed by the singing of the national anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiging, sa silanganan,
Okay, so Miss Angela Cruz, you may now take the floor.
Good day to one and all. Teachers, my fellow students, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to all of you present here. Today, we all have gathered to discuss about an important topic, historical foundations of education, which brings significant implications for the present and future education. The topic would be a great help for each one of us, of course, to gain knowledge and draw comparisons of the origins and development of several ideas, practices, and theories of education in the society. We have assembled here to know more about the topic with our two beautiful and bright speakers lined up for today's webinar. On behalf of my group mates, again, thank you everyone for accepting our invitation. I would also like to extend my gratitude towards our professor, Dr. Kurpus, for giving us opportunity to conduct a webinar like this. Thank you, ma'am, for your kind support, suggestions, and guidance. Once again, I feel honored to welcome you all, my fellow colleagues, to this webinar. Sit back, just relax, and listen to our valuable speakers as we hope you will gain learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome to each of us, Miss Angela Cruz. Napaka-sweet, ano? Tsaka napakahinhe ng ating Miss Angela Cruz. And for this time, humanda na kayo dahil we will now go to the most important part of the program, the first part of our lecture. Our first speaker, Miss Emerline B. Sulima, took up accountancy, business, and management in senior high school at Our Lady of Fatima University. And she graduated with high honors and was an awardee in various subjects and academic excellence. Grabe, napakabigatan ng ating first lecturer. And she is now taking Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English, at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, and is currently a class president and an auditor of Bachelor of Elementary and Secondary Teaching Society, or the Best Society. Wow! She now focuses on a study about the historical foundations of education, specifically in primitive ages until the Philippines-American colonization era. Very related and relevant sa ating topic for today's webinar. Again, let us give our full attention, and let's also give a big virtual hand to our first speaker, Miss Emerline B. Sulima.
Hello everyone, it is my honor to share a part of my study with you all this afternoon. So I will discuss the first half of historical foundations of education. My presentation will be divided into two. First is the key periods in educational history, which starts in 1000 BC to AD 1600s. And the second half would be the history of Philippine education from pre-colonial period until the American regime. So let us define first what is education. So it is a function of society, and as such arises from the nature and character of society itself. So these two concepts, the education and society, is relative to each other. Society seeks to preserve itself, and to do this, it maintains its functions and institution, and one of which is education, and to assure its survival, stability, and convenience, and that is through the socialization. And this presentation will tackle how the school did their task as agent of socialization in different periods of history. Now, let us move on to the first topic, which is the key periods in educational history. We will tackle three different eras, namely primitive societies, the Greeks, and Romans. So here, we are going to see what kind of society each era has and its significance in the education system through looking at four lenses: the educational goal, the curriculum, agent, and influences on Western education. So let us start with primitive societies. So when we say primitive, it is an early stage of evolution or an evolution. So technically, the way of life is starting to develop. So what is important is survival against natural forces such as hunger. Therefore, what were thought were survival skills and values to cultivate group cohesiveness, and we call that as informal education in our current state. So here are the four lenses: the educational goal, curriculum, agent, and influences on Western education. So for educational goal, to teach group survival skills and to cultivate group cohesiveness. So maybe you will ask, why is it important to cultivate group cohesiveness? Because it gives everyone a greater chance to survive. Because as what the quote says, no man is an island. So tribe groups are very common during this era. Now, curriculum, they teach practical skills of hunting, fishing, gathering, stories, myths, songs, poems, and dances. So these stories, myths, songs, poems, and dance, these keep the tribe to have a strong band with each other. Then agent, parents, tribal elders, and influences in Western education is emphasis on the role of information, education, and transmission of skills and values. So if you will observe, the goal and curriculum during this era is still being practiced until today in a way that the relevant skills that are needed in our present society are part of our curriculum, such as the 21st century skills of critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, and information literacy. So now let us move on to Greeks. This one. So this will be divided into two perspectives in Athenian and Spartan. In Athenian, it is a democratic state, and in Spartan, it is strictly ruled military state. So for the Athenian in ancient Greece, what mattered most in education was the rounded development of every individual. While for the Spartan, it was the development of soldiers and military leaders. For educational goal, the general is to cultivate civic responsibility and identity with city-state. So for Athenians specifically, to develop a well-rounded person. So the focus here is to produce thinkers, people who are well-trained in arts and sciences, such as the famous personalities Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. While in Spartan, specifically, to produce soldier and military leaders. Because here in Spartan, it is military focused and values is centered on loyalty to the state and military service. So it was built around the need for a strong military. So in curriculum, Athenians, reading, writing, arithmetic, drama, music, physical education, literature, and poetry. Now for Spartan, military songs and tactics. Tactics is it is a strategy in organizing their operations or attacks. For the agent, in Athens, we have the private teachers and schools, sophists. These are focus on philosophy, rhetoric, music, athletics, and mathematics, and as well as philosophers is also an agent. For Sparta, military songs and tactics. Now, let us describe the influence on Western education. For Athens, it is the concept of well-bounded and liberally educated person. While for the Sparta perspective, the influence is the concept of the military state. So if you will observe, the golden curriculum during this era is still being practiced until today in a way that in our curriculum, students are thought to be reasonable, critically thinker, and enhances a person's problem-solving capacities. And while in Spartan's lens, to serve the community in times of danger. Now, let us move on to romance. So in romance, for the early Romans, schools needed to develop a sense of civic responsibility and to develop administrative and military skills as citizens of the Roman Empire. So during the Roman Empire, the family was the most important unit, and you will see why later. So educational goal, to develop a sense of civic responsibility for republic and their empire, to develop administrative and military skills. So the family is important because it was the nucleus of Roman society and formed the basis of every community. For curriculum, reading, writing, arithmetic, law of 12 tables, which is, this is the consolidated earlier traditions into an enduring set of laws, law and philosophy. Now, for the ancient, private school and teacher, school of rhetoric, and for the influences, we have the emphasis on ability to use education for practical administrative skills, relating education to civic responsibility. So observe that in our curriculum, we are being taught how to use what we have learned for the betterment of society. So here, you see that education and school are function of society, and schools reflect the nature and character of society itself. So let us now move on to the history of Philippine education. So we are going to see how the nature and the character of Philippine society are reflected in the education processes of different periods of the Philippine history. So here we are going to look at the pre-colonial period, Spanish era, the educational decree of 1863, and last, the American regime, starting from 1898 until 1946. Now, let us start with education during the pre-colonial period. So education was informal and is structured, decentralized. Fathers taught their sons how to look for food and other means of livelihood. So it's like in primitive society that their goal is to survive only, so their education is focused in life skills and survival. Hello everyone, it is my honor to share a part of my study with you all this afternoon. So I will discuss the first half of historical foundations of education. My presentation will be divided into two. First, of the interior, a system of free compulsory archipelago, because it required the curriculum. So there was a separate school for boys and girls, and wealthy Filipinos or the ilustrados were accommodated in the schools. So not all kids have right to education. Now let us move on to the educational authoritarian in nature. So when we say authoritarian in nature, it tends to teach their sons how to look for food and other means of livelihood. So it's like in primitive society that their goal is to survive only, so their education is focused in life skills and survival. Mothers taught their girls to do the household chores, and this education is basically preparing their children to become good husbands and wives. So we can also observe the difference in the social roles of women and men in society. So children were provided more vocational training, but lesser academics. Teachers were tribal tutors, and we call them as the babaylan or Catalonan. So here, we will now move on to the education during the Spanish era. So here, education was more formal and organized. And it was authoritarian in nature. So when we say authoritarian in nature, it tends to be characterized by the numerous behavioral regulations and is often seen as punitive and restrictive. And students have neither a say in their management, nor are they seen to need explanations, and the teacher's character is sometimes perceived as being cold and even punishing. So here, now when the Spaniards came, the system of education in the Philippines became formal and organized. So tribal tutors of the pre-Spanish period were replaced by Spanish missionaries. Pupils attended formal schooling in the parochial school, and instruction was religion-oriented. Christian doctrines, sacred songs and music and prayers were taught because they were required for confession and communion. So you see the relationship of school and religion. Since the Spanish wanted Filipinos to be influenced by Christianity, they included that in the curriculum. So there was a separate school for boys and girls, and wealthy Filipinos or the ilustrados were accommodated in the schools. So not all kids have right to education. Now let us move on to the Educational Decree of 1863. So here, during the Spanish term, they implemented the Educational Decree of 1863. And this law gave Filipinos a complete system of education from elementary to collegiate level. And the law provided for the establishment of elementary schools in all municipalities in the country. Although religion was the core of the curriculum, it also included subjects such as reading, writing, arithmetic, history, Christian doctrines, Spanish language, vocal music, agriculture for boys, and needlework for the girls. Again, you can still see the gap between the rows of girls and boys with what should they learn. And attendance in school was compulsory between the ages of 7 and 12. So the decree established a complete system of education in the archipelago because it required 2 elementary schools in each municipality, 1 for girls and 1 for boys, and they standardized the curriculum and established normal schools, thus making systemized education available to all the Filipinos. Now last, the education during the American regime starting from 1898 until 1946. So the American promoted democratic ideals and the democratic life or way of life. So in December 1898, the Treaty of Paris was signed, and that ends the Spanish-American War. And with this treaty, Spanish rule in the Philippines formally ended. So the schools maintained by the Spaniards for more than 3 centuries were closed but were reopened on August 29, 1898 by the Secretary of the Interior. A system of free compulsory elementary education was established by the Malolos Constitution, and in May 1898, the first American school was established in the corridor, and shortly after the capture Manila in 1899, 7 schools were opened in the city. So unlike the Spanish era, everyone has a right to education. So Americans opened the system of public schools. Training was done through the schools that were both public and secular mannered or manned by chaplains and military officers for the U.S. Army. Thomasites arrived in the Philippines on August 23, 1901, and the University of the Philippines was founded in 1908. And UP was the first state school of university status, and the Department of Public Instructions set up three-level school system. The first level considered as a 4-year primary and 3-year intermediate or 7-year elementary curriculum. And the second level was a 4-year junior college and later a 4-year program. So under the Americans, English was not only taught to every Filipino, but is also adopted as the medium of instruction. And this was provided by Act number 74 of the Philippine Commission, the same act which established the American public system in the islands. So maybe you will ask, what is the importance of this lecture? I will answer that through a quote. That says, the more you know about the past, the better prepared you are for the future. This was said by the Theodore Roosevelt. So it is necessary for us to look back to the foundations of education for us to better understand the changes in our system and use this understanding as a guide for us to be better agents of education in the present and in the future education system. And that concludes my lecture for this afternoon. I hope you gained some knowledge. And yes, thank you for listening.
Okay, so thank you, Miss Emerlyn. It was also a great pleasure to listen to your wise words and learn so much from it. I would like also to take the opportunity as well to point some of the best thought Miss Emerlyn said that education is a function of society and arises from the nature and character of society itself. Society seeks to preserve itself, and to do this, it maintains its functions and institution, one of which is education, to assure survival, stability, and convenience.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that, teacher Christian. Now, let us move forward to the question and answer portion together with our first speaker, Miss Emerlyn B. Solima. So it's tanungan time. And now, I see that we got a personal message from one of our blockmates. And I will be reading the question. It goes like this. What is the relevance of studying the foundations of education now that we already have a completely different educational system? Miss Emerlyn Solima, what's your take on this?
You know what, Teacher Mel, napakaganda ng question, no? Kaya katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, it gives us an understanding of the continuous changes that we can use to become better agents of education. Kasi itong mga foundational studies, it promotes understanding of normative and ethical behavior in education development, and thus it will help us in recognition of the inevitable presence of normative influences in educational thought and practice. So yun.
That was a very profound answer from our first speaker. Thank you so much, Ms. Emerlyn B. Solima, for sharing such knowledge and information with us. And I would like just to add on the answer of Ms. Solima. Studying foundations of education or its history is still relevant and immensely imperative, even in the completely changed educational system. Kasi katulad nga ng sinabi ng ating first speaker, as future educators, it is our responsibility na makita yung pinagmulan and there to apply what we have learned from what we have delved into. Sabi nga, diba, if you do not know the history of something, and in this case, the historical foundations, then you don't know anything. You are just a leaf that doesn't know it is part of the tree. A quote by Michael Crichton. Again, thank you so much to our first speaker, Miss Emerlyn B. Solima. Let's give a virtual hand to our first speaker.
Okay, so now to give the certificate of recognition to Ms. Solima, let us call out Ms. Angela Cruz.
Thank you, Teacher Christian. Thank you, Teacher Emerlyn, for sharing your knowledge to us. And now allow me to read the certificate of recognition. Polytechnic University of the Philippines, the Teacher and Community, School Culture and Organization Leadership, DS Eden 21N. This certificate of recognition is hereby given to Miss Emerlyn Solima for sharing her invaluable knowledge as the speaker during the webinar, EDUKasaysayan, a webinar touching on the historical foundations of education, given this 22nd day of April 2022 via Zoom communications. Signed by subject teacher Prof. Rosalie Corpus and head organizer Miss Angela Cruz.
Okay, so again, thank you, Miss Emerlyn Sulima. So before we proceed to our second guest speaker, of course, meron kaming hinanda sa inyo para baka mamaya meron ng inaantok sa inyo. Kaya before we proceed to our next program, we prepare some spectacular talent performance to warm all us up and be more entertained. So without further ado, let's give a round of applause to Miss Krisha Maris Alagos.
Let's go, Krisha.
Go, Krisha.
You with the sad days. Don't be discouraged, though I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all. The darkness inside you can make you feel so small. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful, like a rainbow. Show me a smile then. Don't be unhappy. Can't remember when last saw you laughing. If the world makes you crazy and you're taking all you can bear, you call me up because you know I'll be there. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors. That's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful, like a rainbow. If this world makes you crazy and you've taken all you can bear, you call me up because you know I'll be there. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors. True colors shine.
Ooh, that was a very heartwarming special number from the ever gorgeous and talented Miss Krisha Maris Alagos. Virtual claps naman dyan, guys. Alam niyo ba na it's one of my favorite songs. That's why earlier I was singing along with Miss Krisha and to one of the singer that was with her. And thank you so much, Miss Krisha Alagos.
And yes, Teacher Bell, talagang sana all na lang talaga na binibiyayaan
Yes.
ng magagandang buhay, no? Ayan. So, syempre, gaya kanina, kung nabusog na kayo sa kaalaman, no, sa mga natutunan natin sa ating first guest speaker, syempre, hindi papatalo itong second guest speaker natin. So, proceeding to the next part of our program, we would like to introduce you to our second guest speaker of the day. She is a consistent honor student who is a senior high school graduate at College of St. Catherine, Quezon City. Wow! So she was a third runner-up of Lakan at Lakambini 2018 and became a student teacher of values, education, and social science back in 2018 as well as 2019. She was an English representative and English secretary of an English club in her junior high school days. And now, a business manager from an organization of co-ed named Best Society and continuing to be a second year batch of BSEDEN classroom secretary. So hooray! Talagang bigatin maski mga credentials. Ano? So without further ado, let's give a round of applause to our second guest speaker, Miss Gracia Amor Tamundong.
Ayan. So, hello everyone. Once again, good afternoon to our viewers on YouTube and here in our Zoom. I hope you still have the energy to continue listening as I will be sharing still an interesting fact about the history of the Philippine educational system. So, thank you, by the way, to our host, Mel and Christian, for that entrance. So, I am using here two gadgets, so please bear with me as I will be doing two PowerPoint slides. So yes, ayan. So going back, I would like to call this lecture as the past behind the present system because I know everybody is really familiar with the saying, ang kasaysayan ang bumubuo sa kasalukuyan. So sino nga ba ang hindi nakakaalam doon, di ba? So kung atin pa i-connecta iyan sa personal na pag-unlad ng isang tao, masasabi natin without the past, you cannot be the person who you are today. Nox, sinong relate rather. So sana naririnig po ako ng bawat isa, ano? So again, introducing our points for today, we have, yes, the Commonwealth period, the Japanese occupation, and the post-colonial Philippines. So sana gumagana ang aking PowerPoint slides at nakikita niyo pa rin ang tuluyan ng aking sinishare. Ayan. So basically, ayan, starting the topic, the Commonwealth period is the time when our country was still controlled by the United States. So everything that the Filipinos are undergoing at this time is due to the fact that Americans wanted to force their power to rule us. So the highlight word is rule, okay? In short, the big influence of the Americans on our lives. So isa ang edukasyon sa mga pinanghahawakan ng mga dayuhang ito. So said to be the Philippine education as a colonial tool. But take note, we have
Okay, bibitinin muna natin ang ating second speaker, ang ating second lecture. And as of this time, andyan pa ba kayo, guys? Buhay pa ba?
Yes, present pa po, Teacher Mel.
Pa-react naman ng ano bang maganda ang reaction. Blue heart, pa-react naman kung nandyan pa kayo. Kung hindi ko nakikita ang blue hearts, it means na tulog na kayo. Char. Hindi. Kidding aside, we are having a technical difficulty, I guess. And Miss Amor, are you now ready?
Yes, I am. So I'm going back again. Just a moment, please.
Yes. The show must go on.
The past the Filipinos are undergoing at this time is due to the fact country was still controlled by the United States. So everything that the Filipinos are to. But take note, we have President Manuel L. Quezon, who was seated and elected as the head of the government in the Philippines. So ano nga ba ang tunay na nangyayari sa ating edukasyon sa mga oras na iyon? So sana hindi po ako masyadong mabilis at nakakahabol pa po ang bawat isa. Simula pa lamang po tayo. Ayan. Well, going to the next slide. Ayan. Education focused on the development of moral character, self-discipline, civic consciousness, and vocational efficiency. So makikita natin sa parteng ito, the goal is to help oneself, establishing the GMRC or the good manner and right conduct. So educating how character development is most needed in terms of assessing your attitude and capabilities. So civic consciousness and vocational efficiency, on the other hand, are to exercise the terms of equal rights as well as the conservation of resources of both human and natural. So please really excuse my background noise if you are hearing something. So yes, going back. So the examples we can be seeing here are primarily, and so the examples again we can be seeing here are the household activities. So primarily rather, like sewing or pananahe, cooking, pagluluto, and the farming o pagsasaka. So talking about farming, we all know how poverty really stopped our country from being successful as it can be because we lack appreciation to our workers who should be given the most importance for being able to provide our number one needs. So in general, now because we really have, to adjust in order for the higher ups to also see what is wrong in our system. Ayan. So continuing, in accordance with the 1935 Constitution, walang bayad ang edukasyon sa panahong ito. So free education to public schools was provided all over the country. So take note, free. So the Institute of Private Education was created to observe private schools as well, and there is a formal adult education given to everyone. So ayan, nakikita po sana ng bawat isang akong slides at hindi po ako nai-stuck. Okay. Going forward to the laws in the Commonwealth period. Yan, stable daw ako. Unstable pala, rather. Internet, ayan. Going back to the Commonwealth period, we have the first one, which is the Education Act of 1940, or the Commonwealth Act 586 that was approved on August 7, 1940 by the Philippine Assembly. So this law encompasses the reduction of 1 year level on elementary. Bale, overall years are only until 6th grade, not anymore to 7th grade. So as what we are experiencing at the present moment, hanggang grade 6 lang ang ating elementary. O, diba? And school entrance was also given to, or open rather, to age 7. So class attendance is also required by the law. So dito nagsimula yung pagiging requirement ng attendance natin sa Commonwealth period. Yes, so it's starting from the 1st grade level of the student, it became a requirement to attend or do class attendance. So in this time, dito din nagsimula ang morning and afternoon class, so or the so-called double single session where only one teacher facilitates in every classroom. It was also said that teachers should manage more sections. So yung mga lipat-lipat ng classroom to meet each of your subject teachers, dito yun nag-start. So if you can remember, guys, there are some teachers who told us that they handled not just our section, but definitely until 10 sections. So imagine yung gaano karami yun, di ba? So as well as the start of the academic days, which is from the month of June until the month of March. Then 2 months of vacation ng ating nakasanayan na Abril at Mayo. So the other laws about the Commonwealth education are the Commonwealth Act number 1 or the National Defense Act, which is the preparation of military training given to the children aging from 10 and said to extend this act until college. So next one, we have Commonwealth Act number 80, or so-called Office of Adult Education. Next is Commonwealth Act number 589, or the Singing of Ceremonies. So yung mga kanta tuwing flag raising and flag retreats na nakakamiss sobra kasi di na natin masyadong ginagawa ngayon or hindi na natin ina-attendan masyado ngayon, di ba? And then last but not the least, in our Commonwealth period is the RA number 896, or the policy about completing the elementary grade levels. Ayan. So to finish our Commonwealth topic, the methods told that were used are memorization, recitation, and socialized recitation again. And students were taught about the life of Filipino heroes. So the Commonwealth period emphasizes nationalism. Yes, so gising pa ba kayo? We are next on our second topic, which is the Japanese occupation. So I hope you were enlightened, everyone. So dito, what are your thoughts about how was the Philippine educational system at this time? So, ayan. Question to ponder, what do you think are their influences on us? So, yes. So the Japanese occupation occurred between 1942 to 1945. So it was said that they have caused a big change because as quickly as they have attacked, they also did try to change the course in the Philippines educational system. So forcing the Filipinos to have moral renovation and a spiritual regeneration. Ayan. So, ang objective rather nila was to make the people understand the position of the Philippines as a member of the East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. So, what does this sphere talks about? So, this sphere is said to be forming mutual bonds and benefits between the nations included, which is propagated to the Asian populations. And this failed, remember how this failed because they have not successfully formed said bond. So they also caused a blackout in the Philippine educational progress. So, ayan, next slide po tayo. Ayan. The following was, they introduced many changes in the curriculum by including Nihongo and abolishing English as a medium of instruction and as a subject. So all textbooks here were censored and revised. So you can access the curriculum during the Japanese era in this page. As you can see, we have enumerated here. So I won't be able to be digging deeper anymore because we do not have much time. So instead, I will just reiterate the educational aims, which is to eradicate the old idea of reliance on Western nations, love of labor, and military training. So this was where the focus was pointed during the Japanese occupation. Ayan. So this was it. So for the last bullet of the history of the Philippine educational system, ayan, next slide po tayo. We have the post-colonial Philippines, kung saan makikita natin mula sa pamagat na tapos na, or this was after all the war had ended over nearly 5 centuries of occupation. So we also have gained our independence, wherein the main goal in this era was to unite different populations under common and national identity. So it is like in using education to erase the discrimination between differences and to educate everyone how worse events that happened when there was no strength and resources to stand as one and not anymore being controlled in the hands of colonization. So in other words, the post-colonial period opened the democratic ideals and ways of life of the Filipinos. So of course, there were laws, and there were laws provided or proposed in order to maintain the power of education that is implemented throughout the country. So next slide tayo. Ayan. So these were the laws. Ayan. So we have here the RA, Republic Act 1079, Republic Act 1265, or the daily flag ceremony with the singing of the Philippine national anthem. And the Republic Act 4670, or Magna Carta for teachers. So the other developments are listed. Ayan. So the other developments are listed. Ayan. Wait, let's check. Ayan. Mukhang nabaliktad pa ata. So the other developments are listed in this slide. So you can just check this out. But I wanted to end this lecture by stating the importance of studying the history of education is that it can help us better understand about what we have today, as well as how we could be coming up with a better solution of solving the current problem of the system. So again, teachers, remember, we are the product of our past, and by using our past, we can shape a better future. And so always, past is part of the present. Yes, so thank you very much. So this is my references. So I hope everybody was enlightened. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and I wanted to give back the floor to our host, Mel and Christian.
Yes, everyone, virtual claps naman po para sa ating second speaker. Did you know that Teacher Amor recently celebrated her birthday? So belated happy birthday, Miss Tamondong. And moving forward, gustong-gusto ko sinabi ni Miss Amor yung prominent quote na past is part of the present. And I love this continuation part of of the first part from Miss Emeline Lima. And this time you have enlightened us about the historical foundations during the Commonwealth period, Japanese occupation, and post-colonial Philippines. Several developments, programs, and foundations that were established and formulated during these eras seem to remind us that what we have now, we owe it to the Filipinos, or that have fought and nourished our educational system. Totoo naman na the study of education's past provides us a clear picture of the perspectives that explains and illuminates our present activities as teachers. Ganun kaimportante ang kasaysayan, at salamat sa ating second speaker again, Ms. Tamondong, for that very, very insightful talk. And as a future educator, the learnings mean life to me.
Okay, so well said, Miss Bell. And now we'll be heading on one of our blockmates and direct message to me regarding on our guest speaker tackled. So she said that, Miss Gracia, how do you think that studying history of education would be a help in solving current issues or problems we encounter today in our current educational setup?
So hello, I hope I'm heard clearly. Yes. So yes, to answer your question, teacher Christian rather. So studying the history of education means, having the will to make or to learn about how to make our system better in the future. So dito kasi, kumbaga, dito kasi natin makikita kung ano pa ba yung mga dapat nating iwasan or dapat nating i-go forward, because, past mistakes shouldn't be repeated. So, kumbaga, may sinasabi tayo, di ba, na history repeats itself. So, that should be, prevented kung hindi naman yan maganda. So of course, we have here what you call as adjustment. So in solving our current problems in our educational setup, we are helped by being informed. So palagi naman yun, di ba? Palaging sinasabi sa atin ng ating mga guro na walang kulang kung ikaw ay matututo, walang mali kung gusto mong malaman ng katotohanan, dahil mas malaki ang tulong at gabay na nabibigay nito sa'yo. So for me, that's all po. So I hope that I answered whoever asked you that question. Well, ang ganda-ganda nun. So yes, again, studying history means understanding our present setup today. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Miss Amor Tamondong. And now, another speaker will be given a certificate of recognition. It is none other than, syempre, si Miss Tamondong. So now, let us call Miss Christine Gacosta to provide the said award.
The certificate reads, Polytechnic University of the Philippines, the Teacher and Community School Culture and Organization Leadership, BSADN 21N. This certificate of recognition is hereby given to Ms. Gracia Amor Tamondong for sharing her invaluable knowledge as the speaker during the webinar EDUKasaysayan, a webinar touching on the historical foundations of education, given this 22nd day of April 2022 via Zoom communication, signed by our subject teacher, Professor Rosalie Corpus, and our head organizer, Ms. Angela Cruz.
Okay, so now to award our dear participants for today's webinar, may I call on Ms. Crisia Maris Alagos.
Thank you, Christian. Allow me to read the citation. Polytechnic University of the Philippines, the Teacher and Community School, Culture and Organization Leadership, PSEDEN 21N. This certificate of participation is hereby given to for actively participating in the webinar EDUKasaysayan, a webinar touching on the historical foundations of education, given this 22nd day of April 2022 via Zoom video communications, signed by Professor Rosalie Corpus and Miss Angela Cruz, the head organizer. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Miss Krisha Alagos. Ngayon naman guys, ay mag-i-screenshot muna tayo para sa ating documentation.
Yes, kindly open your cameras and pakita naman ng mga muka sa pangalawang 1-hour webinar.
Yes.
Please open your cameras, guys. Yung mga hindi pa naka-open dyan. Yung mga
Guys.
mukhang may mga nakahiga na dyan. Pero I hope not. Dahil napakaganda ng ating webinar. Do you agree, Teacher Christian?
Okay, so I think we're all
Okay.
ready na. So okay guys, say Eden cheese.
Eden cheese.
One more. 1, 2, 3. Another may second slide pa po. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you po.
Yes, and for the closing remarks, we will be having Miss Christine Gacosta once again. Ma'am, please go ahead.
Thank you, Malbert. I could say that this has been a very informative webinar. Thank you, Malbert. I could say that this has been a very informative webinar, and to think that you all spared your time for this event is something that I, the speakers, and the rest of our group really appreciate. Thank you for listening. I hope that the lessons of the past gives you another reason to value education and to recognize its importance in building a society more than you already do.
Okay, so of course, before we end our webinar, we will have our evaluation form.
And the evaluation form is already flashed on your screens, and you may also access the Google Form link and QR code below in the chat box. So we will give you ample time for answering this, and it will accept responses until May 5 at 11:59 p.m. So no rush, guys.
Okay, so and that ends our EDUKasaysayan, a webinar touching on the historical foundations of education. We would like to convey our sincerest gratitude to all of you, BSED, EN, 21N students.
Yes, and of course, this would not be possible if not for the efforts of the entire group. And so we recognize Miss Sulima, Miss Tamondong, Miss Alagos, Miss Cruz, and Miss Gacosta. And syempre, kami. This has been your hosts, Melbert Galasinaw.
And Christian Elacoria.
Let us sing the PUP hymn.